Welcome to Louisa May Alcott is My Passion, the podcast.
I call you friend, though you lived long before me. It's your words, your wisdom, shining through.
For all of you who are endlessly fascinated with the life and works of Louisa May Alcott, this is your podcast. Here we gather as scholars, teachers, students, and fans to learn from each other, talk with each other, and celebrate our passion for the Alcotts. We'll read from Louisa's works, share the latest news, discuss her work and life with fascinating guests, and sometimes even hear from the old girl herself. And now, on with the show. I am here with Wini Moranville. She is the author of the Little Women Cookbook, Tempting Recipes from the March Sisters and Their Friends and Family. And Wini, I'm so happy to have you here today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a great honor.
Thank you. You've been a food journalist in the Midwest for the last 20 years. What inspired you to do this Little Women Cookbook?
Well, it's funny because it wasn't exactly my idea. I love heirloom recipes. I love literary fiction. And my editor at Harvard Common Press knew this. So when he learned that there was going to be a new movie version out, he asked me if I'd be interested in writing a Little Women cookbook. And, because he knew that I've written a book of short stories, and I read a lot of fiction. And I'm a cookbook editor or author. And so he asked me if I'd be interested in writing it, and I wasn't sure at first, but then I reread the novel, which I had read first as a young teenager, then in 1994 after the Winona Ryder movie, but I hadn't really read it since then, and I wasn't sure how much food was in it, so I said, well, I'll let you know, give me some time to read it. And when I reread the novel, I just couldn't believe how much food there was and what an important role it played, and I was just incredibly fired up about doing the book.
Wow, that's awesome. I heard you say on the radio interview that you completed the book in 1 month's time, and the Little Women Cookbook has 50 recipes that you had to choose, research, update, and then test. How in the world did you ever get all of this done in 1 month?
Well, we wanted the book to come out in advance of the movie, and for that to happen, it had to be written by spring for it to make its way through the editing and production and printing. So it left me, they backed that up to what they can give me, and that was about 4 weeks. But, I've worked as a freelance writer and editor for many, many years on just tons of cookbooks. Mostly within the Better Homes and Gardens family of publications. So I know how to write recipes. I know how to test recipes. I know, I can look at a recipe and see if it works or not without before. I don't have to, test it 6 times to get it to work. I usually only have to test it twice at the most.
Oh.
Because I can tell. I can cook what we call cook on paper and get it right before I actually roll up my sleeves in the kitchen. So that saves a lot of time. I'm also a freelancer, so I was able to tell all my other editors, see you in 5 weeks. I've got this big project going on.
Yeah.
And then once I read the book and figured out what recipes I wanted to include, I found this gold mine called the Happy Trust Digital Library. And that's a digital library it's a digital library of many things, but one of the libraries I have is cookbooks from 1790 to about 1930. And they're searchable. So, for example, pickled limes. I'm like, what the heck are pickled limes? I could search for it. So I didn't have to drive to Iowa City and go through the University of Iowa's stack. That would have been fun, but I didn't have time to do that.
Right.
So I was able to look at actual pages of actual books online, and that saved me a lot of time.
Tons, yeah.
Yeah. And I also did have a colleague help me with some of these. I mean, I guess, 50 recipes, 30 days meant I was testing 2 a day. So I would, before I felt good about a recipe, I'd have a second tester help me with it, or I, if I was really getting stuck, I'd have someone okay, I really want some turnovers. I really want them to be like this. Write a recipe for me, and let's work through this together. So as I acknowledged in my book, I did have help.
Oh, that's good.
Ellen Bokey, who is just as good at this kind of stuff, if not better than I am. So that was great.
Oh, that's really helpful. That's great. In the book's introduction, you describe the role of food in Little Women as a means of showing love, affection, and care, and your recipes reflect that thinking. Can you give me some examples from the book where food was used for that purpose, and share with us some of the dishes from your book? And would you consider these recipes comfort food?
Yes, I most certainly would. Somebody on Amazon reviewed it and with the title of Comfort Food with a Literary Twist. And I thought, bingo, that's exactly what this is. So that made me very happy. But, I mean, just starting with the blancmange, which Joe takes over to Lori. He's got a sore throat. She says, this is, Meg made this, and it will slip down your throat easily. I love the way that the March's cook, Hannah, shows her affection to the family by making hot turnovers for the girls to warm their hands for school, on their way to school. And when Amy gets humiliated by her teacher because of that pickled lime fiasco, Hannah, I love it, she shook her fist at the villain and pounded her potatoes as if she had him under her pestle. So I make pounded potatoes, I make turnovers, I make blancmange. I love the way the family cares through Beth as she's sick and later dies. While she's sick. I love the way they care for her through food. Meg's husband he sets apart some of his money so that he can give her fruits that she loves. Meg blackens her hand to make delicate dishes for Beth. So I put in I researched some of the sort of invalid cooking that was popular in the time. So I found a really lovely macaroni chicken soup that would have fit right in, I think.
Sounds good.
Lori's grandfather is so moved by the girls' Christmas Day gesture of giving away their breakfast that he gives them, this beautiful dinner spread. And one of the things is a pink ice cream and white ice cream. And I put them together in a dessert. Mr. Bear, or Professor Bear, treats the family to fruits and nuts as he's ready to leave, for the American West. And I fold those into a fruit and nut trifle because a trifle was a very popular dessert at the time. And then finally, I think the most touching thing in the whole book is when Jo wants to earn money for her writing so that she can give Beth, everything she wanted, from strawberries in winter to an organ in her bedroom. So I make a very simple strawberries in winter sauce. So those are ways that I touch upon that the family cares for each other through food, and I give recipes for the type of food they share with each other.
That's terrific, and I mean that's something that when somebody has the flu.
Oh yeah, totally.
That chicken soup sounds really good.
It's a good one. I make it's like ever since I developed that recipe, I'm like I'm making this. I've made it quite a few times when people I know haven't felt well.
Oh, that sounds awesome. So there must have been some difficult decisions made as to what to include and what not to include, and I was curious as to why Beth's recipe mapped out in the history of a squash was not included in your cookbook.
Well, I feel that a cookbook author always has a recipe they regret omitting, and that one might be it. I was on such a tight schedule, and Beth's recipe really wasn't working for today's taste. I tested it. I probably could have perfected it, but it was an actual recipe in the book. It was Beth's recipe, and I had a hard time saying Beth's recipe really didn't taste that great, so here's mine. And I don't know, I just felt wrong doing that to Beth.
Yeah.
I know that sounds silly, but I might have done it if I could have had more time to finesse it, both in the writing and in the copy, and the clock was ticking.
Mm-hmm.
And I do regret now, actually having heard your interpretation of the squash, and how it's a metaphor for Beth's life, I do regret now that I didn't include it. So tell us how you saw that.
Oh, well, that story, I was kind of hoping that Lizzie Alcott actually wrote that story, but she didn't. That was Louisa making it up, but in a way that makes it even better, because I really felt like that whole story summed up Beth's life, and Lizzie's life, actually, because it was all about somebody who, Lizzie Alcott was very interested in botany and growing things, and she loved being in her father's garden, so the whole aspect of the story about growing of the squash and all that, that's something she would have really been involved with. And, then we have Beth going to the market and buying things, so that all fits in. And then just the whole idea about care and affection and, making it, and it was written in such a simple way, in Beth's voice, really.
that, you read it and you don't realize at the time that it means anything. But then when you read it a few more times, you realize, this really is what Beth was all about, That,
Totally. And once you pointed that out to me, I was like, drat. So, okay, if there's a second edition of this book, it goes in, right?
Well, you know what you do? You put it up on your website.
I will. Actually, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that would definitely work. So now on to a little different thing. Contrary to the March family, the Alcott family's experience with food was quite negative. Well, I suppose it depends on who you talk to. But Yvonne Elizabeth Pelletier, in her essay called Strawberries and Salt, Culinary Hazards and Moral Education in Little Women, cited several reasons which she believes were reflected in Little Women, among them being hunger, the family's poverty, and then the forced asceticism from her father's strict philosophical beliefs and adherence to a vegetarian diet. So your interpretation of food in Little Women was far more positive, which I really appreciated. Much as I agree with Ms. Pelletier's theories, it was really nice to see a very positive spin on what food was like in Little Women. And I was wondering how you reconcile, I've sent you that essay so you could read it, and I was wondering how you reconcile what Ms. Pelletier had to say and how you interpreted the food in Little Women.
Absolutely. I was really glad you sent me that. I thought that was just a wonderful article, and I certainly see her vision, Pelletier's vision throughout the book. I mean, I particularly laughed out loud, even before I read that article, I laughed out loud when Mr. March was unable to procure a lobster for Amy's little party, and Amy has to go get one herself. I mean, it's so symbolic. It's so perfect.
I know.
It's a non-veiled reference to, Louisa May Alcott's own father, not really doing that great and always providing for his family.
Mm-hmm.
But, I believe, I also love the Joan Acocella piece in the New Yorker, a piece called How Little Women Got Big.
Oh, that was a wonderful article.
Wasn't that good?
Yeah.
And at one point, she says the book is not just a novel, but also a wad of themes and scenes and cultural wishes. And I love that word, wishes. I like to think that Louisa May Alcott loved her characters so much that she wished them much joy and togetherness over food. That even though there's this underlying current of the stinginess of the way they had to grow up, and that just having to grow up with such hunger all the time. I think that one act can have many interpretations in a novel. And so I did focus on the more loving aspects of shared food, which is there. I mean, I think it's there as much as the critique of the asceticism. I really believe both are there.
I think that Louisa showed an amazing ability with her imagination to be able to imagine beyond the pain. A lot of people would have been so oppressed by such a negative experience with food, and yet she managed to insert humor in it, which actually that's how she dealt with the whole Fruitlands experience with Transcendental Wild Oats, is in making it funny so that she could deal with it. But I just really credit her imagination with being able to take something, such a limited and negative experience with food, and being able to expand it into what Little Women is. Because
absolutely, that's a great way to put it. Because I think many writers really do get bound up in what really happened to them and how painful it was, versus being able to imagine a way out. And I really do think that she just loves her characters, and by extension, obviously her sisters, that she wished this other thing for them, this other way of living with food. And that's the way I like to look at it. And I mean, frankly, you're not going to sell a lot of cookbooks if you sort of focus on the way the Alcotts really ate, right?
Oh my goodness, no! But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They would not eat any vegetables that grew down in the ground. Only vegetables that grew up. So there goes potatoes. There were so many things they wouldn't eat. And I can't even imagine trying to write a cook. It's beyond vegan, right?
No, I know. But, actually, I don't know if you've seen Abba Alcott's cookbook that she compiled when they lived in Walpole, New Hampshire. And it's actually their diet, she grew to be quite stout in older age. And when I read her cookbook, I could see why, because it was chock full of starch and carbs and, those types of things that pack on the pounds, because you couldn't eat the protein, I don't know where they got their protein, frankly, but but there was a lot of, breads and puddings and, things that would put on weight. So I thought that was rather interesting and I could also see from her cookbook how, vague the instructions were. I mean,
yeah, the instructions are crazy, aren't they? I mean, that's what I had to do when I was researching all these books. It's like, okay, take butter the size of an egg, But that was fun, too. That was actually just really interesting.
Oh, that's cool. Now, you mentioned food and social interactions in the story, in particular Sally Moffat's party where Meg and Laurie share, quote, laughs over bonbons and, is it motos? And mottos,
yeah,
okay. And Amy's episode with the pickled limes, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Sure. I mean, we have the bonbons and mottos at the party. They're little candies wrapped in sayings. So I get those in my book. Laurie's boating picnic was a huge, social interaction. We had, picnic sandwiches. Well, actually, what's really interesting, we don't get to see what's inside the hamper, so I had to just research what would they have eaten, and I came up with a menu on that. You've got Amy's pickled limes, which are very social. They confer a certain amount of status. You've got Jo's attempt at entertaining with her ill-fated dinner party. Amy's picnic with her artistic friends, which doesn't go so well either. And then, of course, the last scene of the book, which I just love, is the apple orchard picnic with the whole family gathered round. So there are just all kinds of places where the social interaction takes place around food, or food is a part of it, and I give recipes for those moments.
That's really interesting. Now, I imagine that you tried to make pickled limes, and I understand that it wasn't very tasty.
No, I could not make them taste good, and I thought I only want recipes in this book that taste good. I mean, there's another example of Amy, I think she wants tongue sandwiches or something. Oh. You know what? I just didn't think anybody really wanted to make tongue sandwiches. Just didn't want to go there. I didn't want to make tongue sandwiches. So, I mean, I didn't want to figure out how to, first of all, I remember seeing tongue at the supermarket when I was a kid, but I don't see it at the supermarket anymore. I don't think you just go and buy a tongue and boil it anymore.
No.
So I left that out of the book.
I think that was a good decision. So finally, how did the Little Women cookbook line up with your own philosophy about food and family, and what can we learn from Little Women about the place of food in our lives?
I've worked in food for, since 94, when I first started working on sort of Better Homes and Gardens books. And then I became a restaurant critic, and I also became a wine writer. I spent a lot of time in high-end restaurants, in various places in the world, trying some really amazing, complex, imaginative, experimental cuisine. Really great stuff. I have no complaints. It was exciting, but I also have got to the point in my life where I'm done fawning over food. I don't care about having it being the major focus of a gathering. I don't want people to come to my house and just go, oh my God, this is the best meal. Oh, how did you make it? I don't want that to be the focus. I want food to take its natural place in any time I'm having with friends and family, where good food is present, but it's not the focus. And that's the way that's why it was so great for me to write this cookbook at this time, because food is never, people don't focus on the food. It's just there, and it's part of it. It helps people, through social situations, it helps people connect, but it's not the sole purpose of being together. And that's what I love, and that's where I'm at right now in my culinary life.
That's great. And I, while you were speaking, I was remembering having dinners with my husband's family. They are Italians, big Italian family, and I come from a small New England Yankee family. And we had food in our house. We had problems with food in our house because we had a family member who was anorexic and bulimic. So that really just kind of wrecked dinner at our house. But I remember when I was first getting to know my husband when we were going out in high school, and I would have dinners at his house. And when I finally got used to the big, loud, boisterous family that all loved to kiss each other, I started to realize, how healing it was to just sit around the table for 2 hours and laugh and joke and eat and, not worry about your table manners, and just it's a very healing experience, and I cherish that tremendously, and so I can really identify with, what your philosophy is about food and its place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want the food to be good, but we, and it is good. You want that, but you also don't want it to be the end all and be all. You want the important thing is to be the people gathered around it.
Yeah.
And that is the way I feel like it works in Little Women, and that's just where I'm at. And so it was just so satisfying to work on it.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Well, I was wondering if you could let us know where your website is and how people can get in touch with you. And I guess your book is your book available in bookstores as well as on Amazon and Barnes and Noble?
Yes, it's actually quite a few Barnes and Noble stores. I kind of did you can search for your cookbook at all kinds of stores, and I was happy to see that Barnes and Noble's carrying it. And, I think a lot of little independent bookstores, I know my independent bookstore here in Iowa has it, and I bet independent bookstores have picked it up because it's getting some recognition. I just found out today that it's on the Goodreads list of best cookbooks of the year. There's
wow, congratulations.
That are in the running. Well, that shocked me. I mean, there's I'm like, I asked my publisher, okay, how did that happen? I'm not that, I love the cookbook, but I didn't, I just didn't expect that. It's quite an honor. So it's getting recognition. So I encourage people to go to their independent bookstore first, because I think that's always great to support.
Yes.
But it is also available at the larger changes as well as on Amazon. Now, I love it when people follow me on Twitter, especially your crowd who are interested in Little Women, because I enjoy talking to people on Twitter about Little Women, and that we're kind of having conversations back and forth. So at this point, that's the best place to follow me. So it's Wini Moranville, WiniMoran, V as in Victor, ILLE. So at Wini Moranville. And I also have a website called Chez Bonne Femme. That's CHEZBONNEFEMME. Chez Bonne Femme. It's got tons of recipes and cooking wisdom from what I learned while I was in France, or and I was working on a French cookbook. So that's a holdover from that. But I also post information about the Little Women cookbook as well.
Great. Yeah, I'm going to be doing a blog post along with this podcast, and I'll list all those different things so that people can connect with you. That's how we connected, was by Twitter, as a matter of fact.
Exactly. I saw your Twitter handle. I was like, what? And what really makes me sad is I wish I would have known this when I was struggling with this book. I mean, I would have been asking you some questions. But, but anyway, it's great to connect with you now.
Yeah, this has been great fun, and I only have a digital copy of the book right now, and I can't wait to get the real copy because it's so pretty. I mean, it's just this beautiful aqua. I think the color scheme is like aqua and kind of a pinkish and.
Oh yeah, the color scheme is
beautiful.
Totally, aqua, this real contemporary aqua blue with a lot of kind of bold colors from there too. They did a beautiful job. I can't take credit. I feel like I can brag about that because I had nothing to do with it. They took my words and made them into a really pretty book.
It is a beautiful book, and even though it's a modern color, it has a very warm feel to the book. I just really enjoyed going through it.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and I know people will very much enjoy what we had to say to each other, and we'll give your book a look, and more than a look. I hope they'll get it, because I think it's a wonderful thing to add to any cookbook library. As you know, I've put in a disclaimer with my review that I'm no cook. I mean, I really can't. But I looked at your cookbook and I'm like, I think I could do some of these. So.
You most certainly could. I feel like that I put a lot of recipes in there that I consider starter recipes, but then some recipes that are a little more complicated for people who want to go there too. So it's a range.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's perfect, and that's suitable for everybody then. Well, thank you again for speaking with me, and just remember, for everybody who's been listening to this podcast, be sure and check the show notes to see where you can connect with Wini and speak with her. And she is she's a great communicator on Twitter. I've very much enjoyed our conversations. And I hope you'll pick up a copy of this book. It would make for some great recipes for Christmas, that's for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Susan, for connecting and for having me. It's a real honor to speak to you.
Thank you so much.
My thanks to Wini Moranville for a fascinating account of her new cookbook, The Little Women Cookbook, Tempting Recipes from the March Sisters and Their Friends and Family. You can find it at Barnes & Noble, both online and at their stores, and from independent booksellers. You can also order it online on Amazon. I will include the link in my blog post. I will also include Wini's Twitter handle and her website so you can catch up with her. Later in November, I will be doing a podcast about the other Little Women cookbook I reviewed, the Little Women Cookbook, Novel Takes on Classic Recipes from Meg, Jo, Beth, Amy, and Friends by Jen Bergstrom and Miko Osada. Also, coming up in early December, will be a podcast with Lorraine Tosiello about her new historical novel, Only Gossip Prospers, a novel of Louisa May Alcott in New York. Stay tuned! Busy end of the year culminating with the Little Women movie by Greta Gerwig, Heady Times for All. Visit louisamayalcottismypassion.com for all the latest. Hit the subscribe link if you haven't already, and you won't miss a thing. Until next time, happy reading, oh, and happy eating too.